واضحة مثل ما أنا دعمت هيدا بدي أدعم هذا.
فتحنا أبواب اللهيب، أبواب جهنم على البلد.
Good afternoon and thank you for joining us on FutureTV. I'm Linda Tamim and these are today's top stories. French President François Hollande receives Syria's main opposition group Ahmed al-Jarba and says a political solution is the ultimate goal for Syria. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon says the team of inspectors investigating an apparent poison gas attack in Syria will leave the country by Saturday. And Syria's neighbors and the respective allies are stepping up their preparations for conflict. President Michel Sleiman has received Finance Minister Mohamed Safadi in his summer residence in Beit Adin. They both tackled the general situation and the precautions taken to encounter the stage and the circumstances prevailing over Lebanon and the region. Sleiman later met with a delegation of the Jam'a Islamiyya institutions headed by MP Imad al-Hout. The delegation uttered support for the policy adopted by President Sleiman to maintain stability and national unity. It also stresses its commitment to the Baghdad Declaration and its support for the Lebanese army as a sole guarantor of security and civil peace. The municipality of Badawi, with the support of members of the internal security forces, have raided a butcher's shop belonging to a Palestinian national identified as AA in the region of Al-Badawi. The butcher was allegedly slaughtering a cow which was already deceased inside his shop. The experts examined the animal, determined as unsuitable for human consumption. In this context, Badawi's mayor Hassan Ghemrawi stressed that such raids have been carried out several times before and noted that all the meat products in the butcher's shop's refrigerators were destroyed. Former Internal Security Forces Commander General Ashraf Rifi says the Syrian regime is behind the two explosions which targeted Tripoli last week. In remarks published in Al-Kuwaiti newspaper Al-Sayasi, Rifi says there is a great deal of accuracy in media reports implicating Syria in the explosions. He also revealed that Mustafa Houri, one of the two men arrested in this case, came to Rifi's house a month before the explosions took place. The man allegedly told Rifi that the Syrian national security official Ali Mamlouk was planning explosions in Tripoli with the help of Sheikh Ahmed al-Gharib. In August of last year, Lebanese security forces arrested former Information Minister Michel Smeha, who has close ties with Syria's embattled regime, for smuggling weapons into Lebanon in a bid to increase terrorism. Interior Minister Marwan Sharbel has revealed that President Michel Sleiman will ask for more assistance from the international community next month to deal with the crisis of Syrian refugees in Lebanon. In remarks published in Al-Mustaqbal newspaper, Sharbel says Sleiman will discuss with top world leaders the importance of assisting Lebanon over its failure to deal with a growing number of refugees during the UN General Assembly session. Sharbel says a meeting held between Sleiman, PM Najib Mikati and several cabinet ministers at Abda Palace on Wednesday tackled possible areas to settle new refugees amid talks about Western military act in response to the alleged use of deadly chemical weapons by the regime. A branch manager of a local money exchange company has been robbed of $500,000 in cash in the southern port city of Tyre. This is according to a security source who says that police in Tyre are investigating the robbery. Branch manager of Shuman Money Exchange, Muhammad Haidar, has asked an employee to put a briefcase containing the money in the trunk of his car while he replaced a flat tire. The briefcase was missing when Haidar was finished changing the tire. Footage from surveillance cameras showed the presence of two cars and a motorcycle nearby prior to the robbery. French President François Hollande says the world must act to halt the violence in Syria. Speaking after a meeting with the head of Syria's main opposition group, Ahmed al-Jarba, Hollande has urged powers to stop the escalating violence in the war-torn country. An apparent chemical gas attack, which killed hundreds in the suburbs of Damascus last week, has prompted international outrage, and the United States and its allies have held President Bashar al-Assad's government responsible for the incident. In remarks published in the French newspaper Le Parisien, SNC President Ahmad Jarba says that Western powers should quickly launch a punitive strike against Assad's forces and offer real military and political support to stop people being exterminated. A team of UN experts are launching a third day of on-site investigations into an apparent chemical weapons attack. The team did not announce where it was traveling, but activists and doctors in rebel-held areas said the convoy was scheduled to visit the scene of strikes in the eastern Ghouta suburbs. UN Chief Ban Ki-moon says a chemical weapons inspection team will continue investigations in Syria until tomorrow and will leave the country on Saturday. Ban, visiting Vienna, Austria, says he has spoken to U.S. President Barack Obama on Wednesday about the situation in Syria.
They will continue investigation activities until tomorrow, Friday, and will come out of Syria by Saturday morning and will report to me as soon as they come out of Syria, and that is why I have cut short my visit to Austria. It's true that I have spoken with the President Obama yesterday. We discussed how UN and the world can work together, particularly with the United States, how we can expedite the process of investigation. And I have also expressed my sincere wish that this investigation team should be allowed to continue their work as mandated by the member states.
U.S. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel says the assessment on the situation in Syria is ongoing and that a strike on Damascus will have to be an international collaboration. Hagel's comment come a day after U.S. President Barack Obama made a case for a limited military strike against Syria on Wednesday in response to last week's alleged chemical weapons attack carried out by Bashar al-Assad's government. However, the U.S.-led planned attack has triggered strong oppositions from Russia and China. Russian Deputy Defense Minister Anatoly Montanov urges all parties to resolve the problem in accordance to international law. Russians believe that any possible foreign intervention in Syria is criminal and unacceptable, adding it will not help to solve the problem in the region.
Russia made it very clear that it would not even consider any draft resolution before there is conclusive evidence from the inspectors. However, there is basically no doubt that Russia will stand firm and will not change its position of long months now that no intervention is acceptable, that an intervention from the outside into Syria in any way is going to resolve the main problem, stop the bloodshed there. And just how Russia will respond is speculative now. But it may be suggested that Russia will switch to a closer cooperation with Iran. There were some signals to this effect coming from Iran itself, not from Russia yet, but this is what can be suggested. It can also be suggested, again, I emphasize this is speculative, that Russia will step up its military assistance to Syria itself, to President Assad.
Well, speaking of which, Syria's nervous neighbors are stepping up their preparations for conflict. Israel is authorizing a partial call-up for armed reservists, while Turkey is putting on its forces on heightened vigilance. Russia is reportedly sending warships to the Mediterranean, while Britain says it is sending fighter jets to the strategic island of Cyprus. Meanwhile, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has vowed his country will emerge victorious in any confrontation with the United States. Members of the Iranian parliament say the possible military action by the United States and its allies against Syria is likely to result in Syria's retaliation on Israel. They say the Syrian army is ready to protect their country, and missiles have already been deployed towards Israel. They added Iran and its allies will provide assistance to deal with possible strikes from Western countries. Coming up next, U.S. President Barack Obama says America is struggling to fully realize Martin Luther King's vision described in his famous "I Have a Dream." Stay with us. Welcome back, and now we go on with news around the world in brief. Taliban insurgents have killed 15 police on the main highway in western Afghanistan in the latest attack to highlight an escalation in rebel strikes as NATO-led troops withdraw. The ambush raised the death toll in Taliban attacks on Wednesday to more than 30, including an American soldier, 4 policemen and 3 civilians who died when insurgents tried to storm a joint NATO-Afghan military base in the east. A military jury has sentenced Major Nidal Hassan to death for killing 13 people during the 2009 shooting rampage at Fort Hood. Hassan, 42, never denied being the gunman and said the attack on unarmed soldiers was motivated by a desire to protect Muslim fighters in Iraq and Afghanistan. Because he did not dispute the allegations, the trial has been primarily a pursuit of the death penalty. Before an execution date is set, the sentence will face years, if not decades, of appeals. Colombian President Juan Manuel Santos says he is ready to start negotiating peace with the country's second largest rebel group, the National Liberation Army, as soon as possible. The announcement comes a day after the ELN released a Canadian hostage it had been holding for months. Gernot Wober, the ELN leaders have expressed interest in starting peace negotiations similar to those currently underway with the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia. U.S. President Barack Obama says America is struggling to fully realize the vision that civil rights leader Martin Luther King described in his famous speech, "I Have a Dream," 50 years ago, as the goal of economic security for all remains elusive. Obama, the first black U.S. president, spoke to thousands of marchers on Washington's National Mall to commemorate King's landmark address, which came to symbolize the struggle for equality among blacks and whites in America. He says King's speech inspired millions of Americans to fight for a more just society and rights that people now take for granted. Those are his words.
To dismiss the magnitude of this progress, to suggest, as some sometimes do, that little has changed, that dishonors the courage and the sacrifice of those who paid the price to march in those years. But we would dishonor those heroes as well, to suggest that the work of this nation is somehow complete. The arc of the moral universe may bend towards justice, but it doesn't bend on its own. To secure the gains this country has made requires constant vigilance, not complacency. Whether by challenging those who erect new barriers to the vote, or ensuring that the scales of justice work equally for all and the criminal justice system is not simply a pipeline from underfunded schools to overcrowded jails, it requires vigilance.
Today, we're going to let freedom ring all across this nation. We're going to let freedom ring everywhere we go. If freedom is going to ring in Libya, in Syria, in Egypt, in Florida, then we must reach across the table, feed each other, and let freedom ring.
This marks the end of our bulletin for today, and now for a reminder of our headlines. French President François Hollande received Syria's main opposition group, Ahmed al-Jalba, and says a political solution is the ultimate goal for Syria. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon says the team of inspectors investigating an apparent poison gas attack in Syria will leave the country by Saturday. And finally, Syria's neighbors and their respective allies are stepping up their preparations for conflict. Those were today's headlines from Future Television, live from Beirut. Catch us again tomorrow, same time, for more of the world's top stories. Have a great evening.
كل كانت واضحة مثل ما أنا دعمت هيدا بدي أدعم هيدا.